You're listening to In the Company of Charity podcast, and the Deacons Pod is with us today. And
that's right, a little crossover.
Little
podcast crossover.
Come listen to our podcast. Listen to their podcast. Spread the word.
We're already cross-promoting, and we love it.
Yeah.
So maybe, guys, could we start off with just who you are, where you are, and what you're doing with your life right at this very moment, and then we'll sort of deep dive as we go.
Okay. I'm Drew Dickson, one of the three guys on the Deacons Pod. I'm a Paulist Deacon affiliate. That's how we all got together. We're all Paulist Deacon affiliates, which means we're deacons first, and then the Paulists have allowed us to become affiliated with them. I'm in parish ministry in New Jersey. I still also have a day job, and so I'm just your kind of run-of-the-mill deacon, if you will. I work during the day, and I work in the church, sometimes in the evenings, but always on Sundays.
He's an award-winning deacon, isn't he, Tom?
Yes, he is. Highly recognized.
Yeah. Every time we talk to him, he's getting another award.
Yeah. Well, that humility is deep.
I know.
It's the only thing that feeds my ego, and if I don't get an award from this particular podcast, I'm going to be deeply disappointed.
I think you already did, because you followed the rules. And Deacon Dennis and Deacon Tom, they just jumped in without announcing who they were. So I'm disciplined. I'm disciplined. That will give you an idea of what our time will be like today.
You're not the first ones to tell me that, by the way.
We have some like DNA that makes us do that. It's just all that sister just built up inside me. So, Deacon Tom, how about you?
Yes, that's me. Tom Casey, originally from Connecticut and down here in the west coast of Florida. I too am in parish ministry at St. Joan of Arc Parish here in Spring Hill. Lovely parish, small, folksy, and just a lot of real people, mostly aged. We struggle to get young people in, but it's all good work. Working with the parishioners, we have a large Spanish contingency, and we have people who actually do ministry in foreign countries. We got a lady who's going down to Nicaragua for a couple months to work among the poor down there. So it keeps us connected to many different ministries that are all good. Served in banking and prison ministry in my working days, but am now retired and enjoying a good life down here in Florida.
They usually say when religious or priests or clergy retire, that's like in quotes, because you never retire, right? You just keep working, but it's different work.
To retire, that means to tire again in a different way. So.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah, I like that.
As opposed to being retired in place, which is what you do the 5 years before you retire.
I love it.
I think he knows what he's talking about. This sounds like a confession to me. I could be wrong.
Deacon Dennis, tell us about you.
I'm Deacon Dennis. I'm one of the three amigos on the Deacons Pod, which is part of Paulist Productions, and I'm a deacon affiliate, as Drew and Tom are. Tom and I are from the same parish in Connecticut for many years, our families, and we came down to visit them, and we ended up staying here. So that's how this is. And so he's a mile up the road from me. I'm directly across the Gulf of Mexico from Sister Liz here. I wave at her. She doesn't wave back from Brownsville, but I wave at her. I go down to the beach every day and I go, "Hey, Sister Liz."
Hey, over there.
I get nothing. Anyway, so I'm also a jailbird like Tom. I was the senior Catholic chaplain for the state of Connecticut for the prison system for many years, 21 years. And before that, I was a high school teacher, and those things are related, believe it or not. It was great prep for prison work, teaching high school students. And now I am in a parish, St. Francis Cabrini, and I do parish work and, basically your basic deacon, and we have a lot of fun, Tom and I. Like I said, we're up the street, and that's it.
Before we started, we were just talking with these guys about podcast technology, and Sister Elizabeth and I are still in the Zoom casting and Zoom recording, but you guys you've leveled up here. So congratulations.
No, we haven't. You're looking at three Luddites right here. It has got nothing to do with us. We hitched our wagon to a star. The Paulist Fathers invented media. They were the first Catholic press in this country. They were the first in movies. They do movies. They have a whole studio out in California. They were the first radio. They had a radio station in New York City for many, many years. Television. Some people might remember the Insight series, which is a blast. It's on YouTube now, and it's a little half hour. They used to be Sunday morning when they used to do religious program, and they would have all these movie stars and stuff. You'll see people who are like 20 instead of 50, 60, whatever, and they would do these little shows on various moral topics and stuff. So they did that, and then I'm pretty sure if they weren't the first, they were right in there for the internet ministry. They do Busted Halo, they do Sirius Satellite Radio, they have a national show, a nightly national show, and a Partridge in a Pear Tree. So my point is, the three amigos here just hooked up with them, and they do all the magic.
Can you talk a little bit about, we've mentioned a little bit about what the charism of the Paulists is, but what drew you guys in particular to this spirituality? Because you could just be a deacon, right? Like you don't have to align yourself with any religious community of any sort.
The way I came to the Paulists was just by finding them basically in the in the world, and the openness in the community is what drew me to them. And I just got to know a couple of them, frankly, on Twitter, and then and through that media, I found out that they had this program, and I'm like, well, I need to look at that. I need to explore that, because they have a very open charism. I mean, they are looking to bring in the people on the margins. They're looking to make the church a welcome, open place for everyone, and that drew me to them, and so that's why I'm here.
And I think what attracts me is they're in the world enough to know that most people that we're trying to reach are former Catholics or on the outside. So a lot of their stuff is directed beyond the pew, and we just see the attendance going down week after week in our parishes. So how do you cope with that? I mean, we've got to spread the gospel, and if you're not coming to us, we've got to figure out a way. And the Paulist Fathers have done that, how to reach through their publications and technical ministries to do that. It keeps us busy and active to participate in something where we're trying to reach the people that aren't coming anymore.
That's right. You have to go out to where they are. This is Dennis again, and the Paulists also invented campus ministry. Back when the bishops in the 19th century said they should go to Catholic schools, the Paulist said, "Oh, Bishop, they're not. Would you like to save their souls or what?" And they said, "Okay, you can do it." But they were the first to propose public colleges. You're going to have staff that, have priests there and ministry, and so that's another thing. They all, they're always looking for that. And what attracted me to them was their founders were all Protestant converts, all the Paulists. They all, like from the Oxford movement, stuff like that, like, Civil War, 1840s, 1850s, like that, era. And so they found the pearl of great price in Catholicism, and they were like, we got to tell the rest of the American people about this thing that we found. And one of their early insights is, which we know from every other phase of church history that is resisted today. I don't get this, but they said we have to present it in a way Americans can get it. And throughout church history, the gospel was always adapted. The gospel was different in Palestine than it was for the Greeks and the Romans. It was presented differently to the barbarian tribes we're going through this now in Asia. This is the way it's done. And so the Paulist charism was, how do we present Catholicism, Catholicity of the gospel to American sensibilities without pushing them away by saying, oh, you got to be Italian. And they're going, this doesn't appeal to me, this whole the emotional approach you guys have, or these festivals, that kind of thing. So that was their basic 2 points, I think, that they put together, was we want to present it in a way that the people can get it. And they've been finding different ways. All these things I've alluded to earlier were just various attempts to do that. And hopefully we're trying to do that too, which is why, we joke, we laugh, we're a little out of the box, and there's plenty in the box. It doesn't seem to be working. So let's, we're not breaking any rules, but people have different tastes and different sensibilities, but we're trying to reach the people that have walked away or are looking at it going, I don't think so. So, but that's the Paulist charism. I mean, that drew me in. It's like, well, what's the point of putting the hay where the goats can't eat it? I mean, it makes no sense.
Yeah, I love that as you talk about the charism, because I think sometimes, and again, I love that the Paulists are so open to having diocesan deacons as affiliates and being able to use the technology that they've mastered, right, to be able to get you guys on so that you can share in the way that you do. Because deacons are great. I mean, deacons, like you say, you're just regular guys, in the parish, who have found a charism for yourselves as well within the church. You're not clergy in the same sense of the priest. And I think that's a really interesting combination of, like, not every parish understands even what deacons do, right? But then when you think about, not only are you doing something that's pretty unique within the parish and reaching out in these congregations that you're in as something different, right? You're not the priest. Clearly, you're not a sister, right? You're not kind of the consecrated religious that people are used to seeing as the ones who would be evangelizing in the way you're talking, And so I love that. And it kind of harkens back to our own early charism, when Vincent and Louise were out there saying, we've got to do something different, right? Because the cloistered sisters can't serve, the priests need some help, but these young women who nobody else wants to have anything to do with even, right? They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to do it, but we'll show them, and they'll be able to go out and reach the bashful poor, right? Meaning the bashful economically poor. And I feel like the charisms kind of match up, and that you're kind of reaching out in some ways to the bashful, spiritually poor, right? Those who have left and maybe don't know how to come back. So how do you see that as part of also your message of, so someone comes and if someone's been hurt by the church, or, how do you help them heal in the midst of it? How do you help them say, yeah, the church really wants and welcomes you back, and to find that place of reconciliation? Because you're just like them, in so many ways, husbands, and you have wives, and you got kids, and you know what the struggle's like out there. How do you help them come back and find rest and home back in the church?
This is Tom. But I think it's the buzzword today. What Dennis was just saying is that whole accompaniment part of it. We're there, and more often than not, my experience is we get the rage first. We get the anger that comes out why Father did this, or why they haven't gone if you breach the subject of faith, or where people are at in their spiritual journey. And they just unload on you things that they would never say, because, to be honest, a lot of priests will never ask why what damage has been done. And but I think that accessibility is a key part of it, and depending on your skill set of the ability to listen, and people in an emotional state like that, you can't fix the hurt to a large extent, but you can listen to it and absorb it and be with them, and to let them know, like, we're just like any other organization. I mean, it could have been a different structure that Christ put in place, but he took human beings. He took what was broken of his day and age, including traitors and, status seekers, who's going to be first. And he worked them in. And I think leaving the gift of the Holy Spirit is something we have not quite unpacked yet, but is essential to any type of rebuilding that in the critical times we're going through now, and being open to the Spirit and see where the Spirit is leading, because on the surface, we're Houston, we have a problem. And how do you fix that? And I think it's got to be a connection, human to human. It's got to be an emotional and connection to witness the goodness of the gospel and the joy that we carry in our hearts in a broken world, in a world that's so much projecting fear and violence. We're supposed to be that inner sanctum of peace and to transmit that peace and healing power by our presence. That's what the Eucharist is, right? Christ's presence among us, and we're like the yeast in the bread, and we're supposed to do that. And it's a hard role to fill when you run into broken people.
Well, this is Drew, and talking about it like this reminds me when I first became a deacon, and like Dennis said, we are clergy, but we don't look like clergy to people. And so when I became a deacon, I had not been a member of the Knights of Columbus, but my pastor said, you ought to join our local chapter. So I did. And so they came to me when I joined, and they said, okay, now these are the dues. And we don't ask Father Steve because he's clergy. And I said, well, I'm clergy too. And they said, no, you're a deacon. So I realized I was at a crossroads. I either become clergy or I become a deacon. And the dues were $20 a year. And I don't mean to act like I'm the richest guy in the world, but it was easy enough just to pay the dues. And but I still
keep it real.
I still complain about it every year to my wife when the notice comes in. I'm like, why don't they get? That's been over 20 years, you know. And they see me investments but it's funny. But this all goes into, though, you're right. I get people who come up to me after Mass and where I work, who I think find not me because I'm me, but find me because I'm not a priest to be more accessible to them. If they have a problem, and a lot of time the problem is with the church, and a lot of time the problem is just with their life, and they'll talk to me, and I try to listen. But you actually, sister, asked the question, what do you say? What do you do? That's what I've been trying to figure out for a long time. And I just, and I've never come up with anything better than just listening. And if I get a thought that triggers through this that I think is helpful, then I try to share that with them. Sometimes another thing I learned, which I think is related to this, and I learned it a long time ago, and you think you wouldn't have to learn this because it seems so natural, but a fairly elderly priest taught me this. And he talked about when people come up and they're hurting and they say to you, can you remember to pray for me? He said, what I do is just grab them right there and sit them down and say, okay, let's pray. And he just starts praying immediately with them and says, I'll pray for you now, and you can pray and we can pray together, and I'll pray for you later. So, I find it moving to me. I have no idea whether it's moving to them or not, but I find it moving to me when they come and they pour out some kind of grief or problem. And I ask them, do you want a blessing? And they're like, yes. To give that blessing immediately to somebody may or may not be lasting. I mean, we know it's lasting, but I mean, may or may not be lasting in their hearts. But I guess this is my stumbling way of saying, sister, I don't really have an answer, but I just try to be there. Tom said accompaniment. That's what I try to be, and I try not, and so many times, they come to you right when you're now rushing back to the sacristy to take off your vestments because you want to go get dinner with your wife or lunch or whatever. And it's not that hard, though. Honestly, I don't want to overstate that. It's not that hard to just stop. Mm-hmm. And luckily I'm blessed, and I think we're all blessed with a wife that will be sitting in the car if I'm 20 minutes later than I'm supposed to be, getting back to the car to go home. And she doesn't even say, where have you been? She knows where I've been. So.
I wanted, this is maybe a good opportunity because we don't get a chance often to talk to our, permanent deacons out there who are married. And I think it's important to note for the listeners, if you're not familiar with the permanent diaconate, that the wife has to sign on to this. So maybe you can speak a little bit to the teamwork and the like ability for you guys to move forward in this choice in life. But it's not just you; it's your partner there, your wife, who's got to agree and to support, and there's some sacrifice in that too. It sounds like sometimes.
No, my wife is a wonderful person. I want to be like her when I grow up, and she was always for this. When I was ordained, I was 42. I had 3 little daughters. She worked, I worked. One of us was always going to school or something, and she was 100% behind this. Always has been. And when I've said, okay, this is too much, I need to pull back, and no, she pushed it. Nope, you keep doing that. That's very important. So, she really deserves a lot. Yeah, I mean, she's going to have a much higher place in heaven than me. And I think, they do. The women are the unsung heroes because, they have to pick up the slack. I mean, when you think about it, if you're a married deacon, which most deacons are married, and all deacons are permanent, by the way. That's the next thing people have to learn, is that there's no such thing. A deacon is a deacon. A priest is still a deacon. A bishop's still a deacon. And priests aren't permanent priests or transitional priests because, well, maybe they'll make you a bishop. It's just you're a deacon, you're a priest. There's no difference. Anyways, a deacon is someone who has a wife. You have about the national average about 15 hours a week for ministry. Now, that's all your free time. If you think about how much do I sleep, how many hours do I work, I got to come home, I got to do something in the house. I can't get away with nothing,
Well, you do a good job at that.
Yeah, well, I skate a lot, no doubt, but I'm skating right now. So when you say, well, how much time do I have free time? You don't have a whole lot more than 15 hours, the average bear. And and that's the average that a deacon puts in. Now, again, you may put more, you may put less, depending on the case, but you're basically giving up all your time. And so, yeah, mama better be on board or it's a problem. And I've been blessed with a very good woman. So,
well, it's funny that you asked this question too, sister, because we were just talking about this 2 or 3, I guess a week ago. We were trying to do some planning and thinking about whether or not that should be the subject of one of our podcasts, the role of the wives or the relationship and all that. At that time, we were talking about this, and I think it was Dennis's point, but I absolutely agree that you've got wives who are really part of the same ministry. Who I remember the wives came into the classes when we were in formation. Some of the wives came to class. Some wives you're right. They all have to sign off, and they all have to be supportive. But some sign off, and then that's it. Maybe they go to church Sunday with their husbands, and then some have a mixture of that, and they get involved in some of the ministries. So, for instance, my wife and I have done confirmation together, and now she's running CCD in our parish, and I'm not, but I'm doing the RCIA. But the relationship with the wives and the deacons runs a full gamut of everything you might expect that it would, and some are very, very involved, and some are not really involved at all. But it doesn't mean they're not supportive.
And I can give you some breaking news. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
This is Tom. This is my wife went through every class that I went for the diaconate. She was there to help carry the load of the mental load. Again, you're working significant time at work, and then the ministry or the whole training classes. So she did anything, and to my 2 daughters' dismay, they can't understand why she can't be a deacon. But I said,
that's a different story.
That's a different chapter because, but you look from the practical side on that issue, and that's where they're coming from. Well, she did everything you did, but that might be part of the synodal process as how we're going to deal with that. But again, to get the support, especially when things don't go right. I mean, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of complaining going on in our church, and there's a lot of tension going on in our church today. So a lot of things that you don't want to say to people, she's able to bear that the frustration that you carry when you deal with people who are just don't get look at the ministry, we're trying to communicate God's love for us and to deal in the broken world we are. So tremendous support comes in that psychological and emotional support, trying to carry us through and get us through the day, the walking wounded. And my wife, Rachel, is excellent at that.
You know, you brought up something earlier that really resonated with me about when we're working with people who are sort of on the margins, and you were saying the frustration about not feeling adequate, or not as feeling like you have the right words, or what to do in the moment. And I think there's something really humble about that. And to me, it reminds me of one of the things we always talk about is being evangelized by the people that we serve, and learning from them. And so I know that you all have had a variety of professional and then also experiences as a deacon. Would you care to share any stories of people that you learned from, or that you were converted by, in a sense, that touched you and helped you to learn how to be a minister?
I'll share one that still takes my breath away when I think of it. So I had an administrative assistant, and she was an excellent, high talented, largely talented person. And so one day I'm sitting in my office and going through some stuff, and she comes in and shuts the door and starts crying like crazy. Now, in a workplace, like right away, I'm caught totally off guard. I can't imagine what's going on. And she then proceeds to tell me that the local newspaper is going to release the names of the sex abuse people who have filed suit against pedophile priest, abusive priest. And her name was going to be on the list. Now, the case had been going on unbeknownst to me for years. And now it was going to be put in the paper the next day. So she's come into me. I was ordained maybe 5-6 years. And you just realize there are some things you don't have the answer for. What do you say? What do you say? She'd been carrying this trauma. She knew I was a deacon. Nothing was ever said about it until you run into this complete emotional breakdown. And you're just left when you don't have an answer. You just sit there and you just sit and try to be present to that person. And but you recognize the pain and emotional trauma on a personal level. Before that, it's all stories about other people, but now it becomes up close and personal. And you realize so many people are carrying emotional trauma of that. And what does it take to be able to reach them and to try and help? So that's one thing that really caught me flat-footed, not knowing what to do in a way of what could you possibly say to somebody like that?
And the fact that she was able to feel comfortable to share that with you is huge.
Yeah, that because that's a big hurdle to be able to open up.
And again, you were there in working with her. You know, I mean,
yeah.
That was, you can't buy that kind of entry,
or
entree or whatever.
Or try and just give any comfort, you know, because that's, I think, the biggest part of the most difficult part of our road is to bring comfort. You know, comfort my people, Isaiah says, right? You could be there, but how do you? I can't give comfort. I know the presence there, and you hope for God's presence to be able to. We'll get through this. You know, you're going to get through this, and I just don't. I never understood why newspapers would do that. Why the media would put that word out? That they are the cause of the pain, the emotional pain. For what? Because now you're listening. So. So
this is Dennis. In prison, I met so many people, inmates, who, like Tom was saying, were just so traumatized by their past, particularly the women inmates. I worked with both men and women at various points. And, you know, you just listen to the story and it's like, if 10% of what this person's telling me is accurate, if you say 90% of this is baloney, I don't know how she's upright. You know, the horrors, the stories, the things they've been through, and yet they'll tell you, they would look at me. In many cases, I can't even think of one where they would, you know, well, Deacon, you know, I forgive my father for raping me, and you're just like, oh my God, you know. I mean, you get people in there for drugs, for well, most of them are in for mental illness, really, when you get right down to what they're in there for. Untreated mental illness. Welcome to the United States. And of course, being locked up doesn't cure anything, so it's a lot of money for not much. But anyways, these people, they a lot of them are immoral, because they're trying to survive or whatever, and there are all kinds of things, all the bad things you want to say about them. But I came across so many people with such deep faith, they put me, the bishop, and the priest to shame. It's like, oh, I wish I had your faith. You know what I mean? Like, they just believe and they trust God. It's like the poor. Blessed are the poor. It's just, and I'm sure you sisters, you work with the poor. You've seen, just what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You just say these things and you go, oh, I don't know if I could do that. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just tremendous faith that just evangelizes you to answer your question, Sister Liz.
It's just as you were talking, I think when we were on your podcast, we talked a lot about this kind of relationship where we find ourselves with people who are in such deep sorrow, either because they've been physically harmed, they've been emotionally harmed, spiritually harmed. We're working with, Sister Liz is close to the border. I was working with refugees and homeless people, and you're working with day-to-day parishioners. There isn't anybody we come across. And yet we continue in our ministries in a sense of joy. You guys laugh at me. I remember when we first started talking, you were saying, your sisters laugh. Like, how can you be so happy? And how are you guys so happy? And so that's one part of it is, how do you think that we continue in the face of such pain sometimes to still be able to put the joy of the gospel out there, right? The joy of the life that Jesus Christ has won for us. And so in the second part of this question is, how do you see that as a tool for, or a spiritual way in which we can increase vocations, right? Not just to religious life, right? We're out here, this weekend we're having what's called Choices of the Heart retreat. There are 9 young women in St. Louis discerning. This is Choices of the Heart is like the 3rd tier, I think, right? It's like they've been to other discernment weekends, and this is the one where they're getting close. And I'm going to be bringing 5 novices. We call them seminary sisters, but that's who I work with now. It's going to be a room of 14 young women talking about religious life, joyful, loving the Lord, loving it. And I know in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I hope they can sustain this when the sorrows of the poor they'll serve, sit with them in prayer as well. And so I guess it's kind of a bigger question, but one, how do you continue to find joy in your ministry and in the ways in which we encounter those who are suffering? But also then, how do we continue to discern? There aren't that many deacons out there either. There aren't many people signing up to be deacons as there aren't to being sisters. How do we help people find their vocation in the midst of all of this?
I think we talk about this all the time, and we did talk about it back when we talked to you before about it's because I think the Holy Spirit is real. And the Holy Spirit gets into us when we are confronted with this suffering, but we know that the love of God is there with us and with them, and it's a matter of faith, I think. But I say it to people all the time, and I know that Dennis has said it, and I know Tom said it, and I'm hearing you say it, that as hard as it is, once you've encountered the suffering person, and they have encountered you back with a blessing of being themselves, I just walk away from it with more joy in my heart than when I walked into it. For a long time, not now anymore, but for a long time, I worked in Newark, New Jersey. And there's a lot of homeless people in Newark, New Jersey. So I also worked for Catholic Charities, years ago, and that's what we did. We served the homeless and we served the mentally ill most of the time. We also had workforce programs and things like that, but we had more shelters in the most populous part of New Jersey than any other entity, more homeless shelters. And I was constantly working there and in those, in that environment. And, you know, and people are like, oh, how do you do that? But it's when my wife started teaching, she was a special ed teacher and she worked with special ed kids, and people would say, oh, how do you do that? But you could see the joy in my wife's face. She just loved what she was doing. So it wasn't hard for her. So I know you can get burnout working among the poor. I mean, if you don't have enough faith, you can get burned out pretty quickly. I know that by experience, not my personal experience, but you know, people that I've worked with. But I think I'm giving you more of a biblical answer, I think, than what you might be looking for. But or maybe you're not looking for any answer. But I think to draw people in, they see that. And I just want to say, about 3 weeks ago, my wife and I were at an archdiocesan program, which was basically a retreat for 8th and 9th graders, given by the archdiocese, and there were about 300 kids there. But as part of it, there were several vocation tables set up of sisters, different sisters, orders I never even heard of. I didn't know we had in our archdiocese, and it was really fun to meet them. But there were sisters, and there were a couple of priests. There was a Carmelite priest and a Carmelite brother, and all these people were so smiling all the time and so joyous and so friendly. And we had some Salesian sisters, Dr. John Bosco.
John Bosco.
Yeah, the Salesian sisters, and they were so young. And I'm like, are you really sisters? Or are you little sisters of the sisters? And everybody in that everybody was just so full of joy, and it was really, really rubbed off on the kids, you know, and it was just good to see. It was a very good day. I walked away from it, you know. I was not really looking forward to it because I don't minister anymore to 8th and 9th graders. But I went and I was there all day, and I'm like, that wasn't bad. That wasn't bad. I don't know, sister. I think I just rambled on for about 5 minutes.
You did. You did.
Cut that. But that's okay.
You embarrassed the family. It's where you. Tom and I are used to it, but the sisters, I thought, with company, Drew, you know, maybe. But well, you know.
But I think it is a hard. I mean, I didn't mean to make it a harder question than it needs to. But I think there is that.
It wasn't you. It was me.
Yeah, but it is that balance. It's that balance of knowing that, you know, we're not recruiters, right? We're not out there, right, you know, like the army or something. We're encouraging people to find their vocation, and the vocation is going to be one that you fill your heart with joy to live out, even though you know what's going to be in front of you. In our case, we would talk about the crucified Christ. Well, you know, how joyful is that, you know? And yet when you've experienced it, when you want to give your whole self to it, you know, you can't help but see the beauty in the whole thing. And I think it's the joy. It's, you know, how when we listen to you guys, I mean, you're laughing and you're joking around, and I'm thinking, you know, these guys have seen some tough things, and you're right, the church is struggling right now, but we're still finding joy in it. We're still finding that this is the place we belong. It's where we want to be. And so to have those religious at this thing, having these 8th and 9th graders, it might not mean anything to them now, but who knows when they're 20, they see another happy sister in the parish and say, man, they're still happy. 10 years later, these folks are still happy.
And they do come later on. They come back. There were kids I confirmed, or I didn't confirm. There were kids I helped get through the confirmation process who now bring their babies to me to get baptized. And they remember. They say, I was in your confirmation class. And I'm like, oh, I remember you. I didn't, but I act like I did. But actually, I'm sorry for dragging out my long befuddled answer, but
Stop digging. What I
wanted to say was that whole stint in Newark, I always carried extra cash on me because I know that this could be controversial. Do you give cash? Do you do this? Well, I give what I have. And if it's mittens and scarves, which I take in the winter, I give that. But I always have cash. And and this is the trigger point. I give them cash and they look at me invariably and say, God bless you. And for a homeless person who is really, really homeless, I mean, freezing cold on the side of the street in Newark, New Jersey, to say, God bless you, I just take it. I mean, I'll take it every time.
Amen.
You know, I think Drew's rambling answer, though, actually was correct. I think there was a lot in there. And I really don't think he was rambling. I just like to give Drew the business.
It doesn't matter. I stopped listening 5 minutes.
Brotherly affection, right?
Yeah.
You'll
Sister
be
Liz usually cuts out my ramblings, so it's okay.
That's what editors.
That's what they
Bless
do.
your
That's
editors.
right.
That's right. You sound intelligent. I like
Feel
it.
free. Feel free.
But you know, with what Drew was saying, and first of all, there's the old adage, which is absolutely true. Everybody here will agree with: you get back more than you give. There's not one of us has experienced it. And, you know, the best way to convince people of ministry is say, come with me and try it, you know, and it's true. I can't explain it. I wouldn't expect it. I would doubt it, but it's like, this is life-giving stuff. So even though you're bearing, and it's the cross thing you were talking about, you say, oh, it's the cross. This is ugly. This is awful. You are correct. But there's joy in bearing it. It's for a good cause. It's no different than you say to a young woman, well, what would you like to do? Oh, I'd like to be a mother. Oh, really? You know that kid's going to drive you nuts? Do you know he's going to be making a mess you're going to have to clean up regularly? Do you know, he's going to have problems in school or with the law or with drugs, or, you know, and it's going to break your heart. It's still worth it. And there's still joy in it. And it's what's the difference between that and being a sister? It's all struggle for everybody. It's all joy. It's just whether you're in the right struggle. And I think that what Drew was saying, you know, about that feedback loop, you know, that we get, you know, as I was saying, we get in return, even while we're giving, the Holy Spirit that he mentioned, you know, one of the best explanations of the Trinity that I ever got that really helped me was the idea that, the Father loves the Son and the Son returns that love to the Father, and neither of them holds anything back because God is love and gives himself completely, and that love that flows between them is the Holy Spirit. And so I just picture this great feedback loop, this moving love going between these two persons. And then we are invited in through baptism and confirmation. Now that feedback loop does actually go through me. I know I don't look like it, but I am a Jedi master and the Force is strong with me.
It's a good thing we're audio only at the moment.
Yeah, it'd be even funnier if you could see me. But the point, I look like Yoda, I do, right? But anyways, the thing is that this is on the experiential level. Drew kept talking about faith, and yes, it is faith, but your faith is confirmed by your own experience in the moment. I am stronger. I am more joyful, even after, Tom will tell you that, even sitting and grieving with that woman who was going through that awful experience in his office. We all know this. You know this. It's just hard to communicate it to people. And the last thing I want to say, so that's on that. I think that's how it works. There's actually a feedback loop that develops, and the joy and the power of the Spirit, which St. Paul talks about and all this stuff, and you read it and it goes in one ear and out the other, and then all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, wasn't that what he said? And you just have the experience, and you go read it again, and you go, that's right here. This is what he's telling me. It's like, duh, but so I just think that it's not all like, oh, how do you do it? How do you carry the misery and the weight? Because I don't carry it. I give it to God, and God supports me, and I support this person. And then that person often evangelizes me back, and I'm even more supported. And it's not me, so, and I think Sister's point about the happy sisters is true of everybody. The mission of the church has three pieces to it, proclaiming, witnessing, and serving. We talk a lot. We got proclaiming covered. Check that box off. If you ain't hearing us you're really trying hard not to hear us. I don't know what to do about that. Serving, there is no other entity in the world that has served more human beings than the Roman Catholic Church. And I do believe it's the biggest organization serving the most people, the most schools, the most hospitals, whatever you want in the world as we record this. So what's missing? Back to Sister Elizabeth's point. It's the witness. It's the joy. It's what Pope Francis is saying, where he says, as Christians, you look like it's always Lent, or you just came back from a funeral, Or as Nietzsche said, you Christians don't look redeemed to me. I used that in a sermon once in the prison, and it became a catchphrase. And people be walking around, and I hear them saying to each other, "Look redeemed," So I think witness is where we're lacking, and you can't fake it. And if people see it, they'll want it. It's attractive.
Yeah.
I wanted it when I saw it in someone. That's why I'm here.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're right. That feedback loop is really, I see it in the young sisters that I'm with right now. They are wonderful, energetic. They have all the youth, but they also have the joy. I mean, they're just incredibly joyful women. And so, what I like to be out back with the refugees in Utica or homeless people, that's what I came to do, to serve. But I'm serving here by helping witness their joy, encourage it, and hopefully catch some of it, to be joyful with them. So yeah, I get that sense of it coming back. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it, right? And once you've seen it, you can't not be it. If you're really letting the Spirit in your heart. Yeah, it's great.
This is Tom. I was just telling Rachel the other day, it's the full moon was a couple nights ago, and I happened to be up in the middle of the night and looking out, and the thought that came back to me, I remember I walked into prison for the first time on January 5th. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and the moon happened to be just where it was the other night, which triggered a flashback. And I just remember walking, it was cold, it was freezing. I'm walking across the compound to get into my office. I got 500 keys. I don't know how long I'm going to freeze to death before I figure out which key opens up the door. And just being so like apprehensive and really afraid, like I'm coming into a prison, like this is crazy. People trying to get out of prisons. What am I doing coming into prison? And just like from the first moment on, just getting in there and having the thought saying, listen, you're here because God brought you here. And I think that was just a moment that changed everything. And I walked around the first day, and I didn't know what I was doing. And the corrections officers knew that I didn't know what I was doing. But you start introducing yourself and get into it. And all of a sudden, you find out you're there because God put you there. And it changes your whole attitude and disposition. And so things that other people wouldn't find funny in some ways became a source of either a story or you're being, maybe a bad situation, but you're there to bring some joy, to find the good, whatever bad happens, because it's a lot of bad happens in prison. So you become the one that has to point out, and that becomes an operating principle. God is there, and you're able to find and start to see things in a different way. And that's been true in many of the experiences that I've had, that whole idea of funerals. I was at a parish. They said it was that had the Golden Casket Award because they had the most funerals in the diocese. And I did a lot of the gravesides or the vigils. And again, emotional situations, young kids, car accidents, all kinds of things. And you're the person that has to bring in the joy. And it's not my joy. It's coming from the Holy Spirit because he's using you. And I always felt that you have to bring God's peace into this tragic situation. And that has fueled my ministry in many ways.
Yeah. And the other thing just about, Tom was talking about and Sister Elizabeth was asking is that you can't be an empty suit. You cannot be playing a role. You can be a sister, but you gotta also be Elizabeth or Liz or and Tom and Drew and I. You just can't if you come at people as a cardboard cutout or a corporate representative or a company man or whatever you want. I'm talking about that kind of thing, that one-dimensional thing. There's no connection. Tom connected with these people and the inmates. He connected with them by being his own actual self, and they loved him. And he did their taxes for the ZOs, so that always helped too. But that's true. He did.
Yeah,
But
it's a great point. Though. It's a great
you
point.
Be you.
Yeah.
You got to be your version of Jesus. You can't be Saint Vincent de Paul. That's been done. You know, you got to be your version of Jesus. You know, and you can do it as a sister if that's your calling. That's how you got to do it, or a deacon, or husband and wife, whatever. But that's part of the witness thing is we got to be us. We got to be real. We got to quit putting on an act and posing for holy cards. And like, you know, people look at us and go, you're crazy. You're not for real. Stop bothering me with this. So I think that, you know, Tom is a good illustration of that. And he was very successful. And I think that was his secret sauce, watching him work a room of 120 convicts.
Yeah. That's great. That's beautiful. I love it. I love it. Just be yourself. We try, don't we, Sister Liz?
Oh, always.
We try.
We can't help but not be ourselves. We just can't do it. So
we just
it
can't.
Comes out.
The laughter gives you away.
Yeah.
That's why we first connected. You know, we all, you know, like knows like kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's like that's the joy of the Holy Spirit. If they're not laughing, you know, what was it, Saint Teresa? God deliver us from sad saints or whatever.
Yeah,
it's true.
The doctor of the church. Listen to her. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the Holy Father tells us not to look like old maids, you know.
That's the best. I forgot that one.
Yeah, don't go out there with your old maid face. Okay.
The Holy Father needs to get a new writer, and sometimes because he had a mother-in-law joke in there the other day, and I was like, "Ooh,
careful."
I mean,
Let's see,
Argentina must be a real different culture than America is these days." Because
yeah, well, thank God for him, you know.
Yeah. Oh, we love him.
Well, this has been so delightful, you guys, and we can't wait till another time. We have to, you know, we're gonna have to do this again. And you know, when I think of deacons, I think of the guys who preach the word, you know, that it's about the word, but you guys are preaching the word and living the word, and we're just so grateful to have had you on today. And I'm sure we'll be keeping each other in prayer and supporting each other's podcasts. And we just love you guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, Deacons Pod. Check it out.
Go listen.
If you haven't checked it out, go listen.